All right, good. Well, we are here. Good evening, everybody. Sorry for the delay. And welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Board for Wednesday, April 10th, 2013. Can we have roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Brown, Mr. Colton Max, Ms. Foy,
Here.
Ms. Bauer,
Here.
Mr. Hutt,
Yeah.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Torpe, Reverend Wilson,
Present.
Ms. Guha, Mr. Allen,
Yes.
and Mr. Goldstein.
Yes.
Thank you. As pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 231, PL 1975, this is to state for the record that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public by posting and maintaining the annual notice of regular meetings on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by mailing the annual notice of regular meetings for 2013 to the South Orange Maplewood News Record and the Star Ledger in December 2012, and by filing said notice in the office of the village clerk. First bit of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held on March 4th, 2013. Do I hear a motion for those?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I abstain.
I abstained as well, so
Abstain.
many abstentions, but everybody else approved. Thank you, Judge. Okay, so we have a quorum, we have TV, so I guess we're ready to hear. The first bit of business is an application for completeness. This is case number 227, Seton Hall University, the Aquinas and Stafford Halls, Block 901, Lot 3, 400 South Orange Avenue. This application is in front of us for preliminary and final site plan. The Stafford Hall, the applicant proposes to replace the existing classroom building with a new academic building, and at Aquinas Hall, the applicant proposes to add a new fourth floor, new entry lobby, and northwest corridor addition to add 164 beds. So I think we will go to our professionals to hear their opinion about the completeness at this point. So I could start with Susan Gruhl of Fire Group.
Thank you.
Yes.
I believe all the board members have our memo dated April 4th of this year regarding completeness. And we have coordinated with Omlin Engineers, and this is a coordinated completeness review. We recommend that the application be deemed complete for hearing, subject to the granting of submission waivers. And we believe that there are a number of, there is information that we recommend needs to be addressed during the hearing process, particularly related to traffic and parking. However, in coordination with Omlin, we felt that it could be deemed complete, recognizing that that would be one area that there would need to be testimony on.
Okay, thank you.
We have laid out in detail the items that they're either are requesting a waiver from, well, that they are requesting a waiver from.
Board, do you have any questions for Susan? Frank, do you want to add anything to that, or is she speaking for you as well? Maybe you can introduce yourself to the TV public at large.
Frank Russo, I'm with firm of Omlin Engineering. The only thing I would add is that
Make sure you're close enough to the mic just so we can... Thank you. Just share.
the only thing I would add to Susan's comments were that the stormwater, there were discussions back and forth between our office, the village engineer, and the applicant's professionals regarding the analysis that was required, and that came at, those discussions happened after our technical report. We believe that there is sufficient information for it to be complete. There will be revisions necessary to the stormwater report, but I don't think any of the revisions or any of the calculations that need to be provided have any impact on any relief that may be granted and could be conditioned, in any approval.
Okay.
I would also just like to note that since the last hearing, when there were some outstanding issues with respect to completeness, we did note at the end of our memo, they had submitted photographs of the site, they submitted species of trees, a letter addressing parking, and new lighting plans. However, I would note also in this, revised engineering drawings have been provided. The architectural drawings, there's some minor discrepancies between the architectural and the engineering drawings. We believe they have to be adjusted, but that can be necessary, would not necessarily hold up completeness per se.
Okay.
But that is noted and it is within our memo. I would also note that in our completeness memo, and this goes to the coordination with Omlin as well, that we requested that the parking and the circulation assessment be considered in light of all of the overall applications, not just individual applications, but looking at all of the applications that Seton Hall has in front of both this board and an application that they have in front of the zoning board for the expansion of the parking deck. So I would just note that as well.
Okay.
It's a good question.
My question was, how are we going to handle that then?
Well, I'm
With
not
respect to
sure.
traffic and circulation?
I'm not sure that the intent of this is to have this hearing look into all of those issues in detail. Perhaps certainly there will be a discussion in the presentation of the master plan that shows you those other projects, one of which is before this board, though you haven't heard it yet, and the other before the zoning board. There will be testimony about the existing parking situation and the future parking situation. So I think that certainly that'll be covered in testimony. Off-site traffic, of course, is not an issue because of, this is zoned for the university use and it's within that zone. So I think those are the principal issues. Our engineer will explain circulation as it relates to this project, as far as, and really the circulation won't be materially changing regarding these projects, I should say. So I think that you will hear enough testimony, you'll be comfortable with this issue.
I guess I would just caution that it's one thing to have the engineer testify as to circulation itself, but based on what the planner just said, I'd like to understand about trip generation and trip management in light of our standards with respect to the entire build-out, at least as it's presently conceived, not just this. In other words, I'd like to understand this within the framework of all of the trip generation or trip management. Do you understand my point?
Well, I do. I think, though, that we can perhaps run the risk of biting off too much in this particular application, but these two are relatively discrete, I think well-defined, and in some sense minor projects. One is a replacement of an existing building. So I think you hear the testimony and we'll see where we go.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So just as a follow-up, being that the master plan has not been approved, how do you hear the application without approving the overall scheme? I mean, even though we're hearing it piecemeal to me, and we have not approved the plan that has been submitted. That's number one. The second question I have, since retention and demolition and so forth, has this been submitted to the Environmental Commission by our own rules for their comments? And I don't know the answer to that.
The answer is no, but under the manner in which we operated before, and I'm not entirely sure how you operated when you were the representative, since I'm the representative now, I basically took it upon myself to review everything and be familiar and ready to ask questions, and only if there was something that I deemed necessary to bring back to the Environmental Commission did I do that during the period of 2000 to 2006. I have determined that there's probably something I want to bring back to the Environmental Commission, but it doesn't relate to Stafford and Aquinas. So that was my judgment. If you want me to
Okay,
operate
because
differently,
normally,
I'll do
I
that.
believe the policy was set by the board a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago, that it would automatically go if it was a major, and Sal would automatically send it to the EC for review, and if we didn't hear from them, we didn't hear from them. I believe that's the way we had it scheduled, and that hasn't been changed, so, but be that as it may, the main question is still, we're hearing this in pieces rather than looking at the entire program. I don't understand why we're looking at the entire, in pieces without approving the entire plan.
Well, if I might address
Sure.
that, I mean, the master plan is a document that's required under the South Orange ordinance. It's not a municipal land use requirement, nor could it be. So, and the ordinance itself provides that the master plan shall be submitted and approved, but the master plan may be amended from time to time by the university. So I think the intent of the ordinance is more to show the board what the university's best known plans are from time to time. Those plans get amended actually repeatedly and deal with it in that fashion. I don't think it's something where, it's something that deserves a whole lot of attention from this board. It's more the university's, game plan for the site rather than something that is binding, of course, on the university or on the board. What's binding is the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance has very definite requirements with respect to development of the campus. It has FAR requirements, it has coverage requirements, has many different requirements. So that's the sort of the long answer to your question, but we will be presenting the master plan this evening to explain it to you and to obtain your approval of that, given the fact that the approval is something that is not binding. It can be amended from time to time. I think Mr. Dwyer would agree with that analysis.
I don't disagree with Mr. Coakley's analysis that the master plan from the applicant is a policy document, just like the township's master plan is. It's not necessarily a binding ordinance. It'd be good to have it. It would be nice to be able to plan 10 years down the road. But I think Mr. Coakley was very honest in saying that they change the plans fairly frequently. So,
My only point is, I mean, this is contrary to some of the statements in the write-up of Keller Engineering. This is a major program. This is doubling the size of buildings. And I'm just wondering if we shouldn't just hear the whole thing rather than piecemeal. And that's why I just...
Well, as I should have stated in the beginning, is only some of these applications are before this board. There's 3 pending applications. 2 are before this board, and the 3rd is before the Board of Adjustment because of the need for a height variance.
But we've had 2 others that
Yeah.
you've done also. You did the rec center, you did the scoreboard. I mean, we've had 5 applications within a year, and they're all at different times on different things. And I think what Mr. Miller is saying, it would have been nice from the first go-round if you had told us what the plans were all at one time, so that when we're making judgments about parking or drainage or anything, we're not saying, okay, do it now, because who knows if it's going to affect your next one. So wouldn't you rather have them all together and be discussed at once rather than maybe getting approval at one and that affects one down the road that you're not going to get approval on?
Well, I think when the
It just
rec
would have been
center
nice.
was done, I think there was a disclosure of future projects at that time. You know, I don't know that the university at that time knew exactly what they were going to do with these other projects. It's not like you can always depend on being able to do the things that you might plan on doing. Those were relatively small projects, the scoreboard in particular.
Right, well, yes,
The
I know,
rec
it's
center
just
was about 18,000 square feet on three stories. So it was about a 6,000 square foot footprint, which, you know, I think the testimony at the time indicated it was not to add more traffic or more students, it was more to fit an existing need.
Right. I wasn't commenting per se on that application, it was more the number of applications and the different things
Right.
that just keep coming as opposed to, it would have been nice, as Mr. Miller said, that if we had a grand scheme of things to know what the impact long range is going to be with all the different projects. So that we're not asking you now at one and then asking again at the next one, or something may have changed in between, that was all.
Well, we'll start out tonight with testimony about the overall plan as it exists.
Okay.
All right. You know,
Before we
I guess-
begin, Mr. Coakley, I guess the board's going to make a determination on completeness at this time?
Yes. Do I hear a motion?
Yeah, on advice of our engineers, I so moved.
So I hear Moon, do I hear a second? I think we'll do a roll call on that, Virginia.
Ms. Foye?
Yes.
Ms. Bauer? Mr. Hutt?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Reverend Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
And Mr. Goldstein?
Yes.
Okay. So we are prepared to hear the application tonight.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Should we find, can she come? What can she do?
She's going to be here now. She's going to give us-
We're just going to take a very, very brief break and get one of our members who's skittered away.
Okay.
All right, so can you give us one pause, 3-minute pause? And in doing that, I'm going to go get
No, I know, I agree.
Okay, we are ready to resume. Thank you. Council?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Maybe let me just say that now we are going to hear application case 2217, Hall University, Aquinas and Stafford Halls, Block 901, Lot 3, 400 South Orange Avenue. This is a preliminary and final site plan application for Stafford Hall. The applicant proposes to replace the existing classroom building with a new academic building. Aquinas Hall, the applicant proposes to add a new 4th floor, new entry lobby, and northwest corridor addition to add 164 beds. Thank you. Now.
Thank you very much. Good evening, and pardon me, I should have introduced myself before. My name is Kevin Coakley. I'm with the firm of Connell Foley in Roseland, attorney for Seton Hall. We appreciate your being here this evening. This matter was first called on March 4th. Notice had been given as to that meeting, and it was carried on the record to this date. So we're here, I think, having established the jurisdictional requirement for hearing. Mr. Chairman, as you indicated, there really are the two matters before you. One is Stafford Hall, and that's to replace the outmoded existing classroom building with a state-of-the-art classroom building, which will be described to you. And secondly, to add an additional floor to the Aquinas Hall dormitory for 164 beds, and 16 of which will be ADA compliant, an important element of this application. There also are some changes to the lobby. Before we get into the details of that application, we'd like to address the master plan. And again, as we went over in the colloquy previously, the master plan is, pursuant to the ordinance, is the submittal of Seton Hall as to its plans. And the words are important, Mr. Miller, I think, for your concern, as best as can be determined. And so that's really what the ordinance says. It's the best effort of the university, and it's not locked in stone. It can be amended, and probably will be. So with that brief preface, I'd like to call Mr. Garbini, Vice President of the university, who will testify as to both the master plan and as to the goals of the university with respect to the buildings that are before the board. Mr. Garbini, would you state your name for the record, please?
Dennis Garbini.
Pardon me, Mr. Garbini, would you raise your right hand and be sworn in, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll give here this evening is the whole truth?
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Dennis Garbini, 10 Woodland Avenue, Denville, New Jersey.
Mr. Garbini, what is your role at the university?
I am the Vice President for Administration at the university. I've been employed there for 41 years.
All right, and what are the general duties of your office?
Principally, this discussion includes facilities, HR, technology, contracts, and various other things, more.
All right, and do you guide the building program of the university?
I do.
All right. And in connection with that, have you directed the preparation of a master plan that's on the easel?
Yes, I do.
All right. And with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to mark that as A1.
Permitted.
Mr. Garbini, before
Mr. Coakley, is there a date on that?
November 30th. November 30th, 2012.
Thank you.
all right, Mr. Garbini,
I'm sorry, in a revision, March 4th, 2014. 13.
last revised March 4, 2013, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Garbini, was this master plan originally submitted to the board in connection with the pending application for the new university center?
Yes, it was.
All right, and that application has not been heard yet by the board?
No, it has not.
All right, so it's this, but it's the same plan that was in that package?
Yes.
All right. All right, would you just go to the easel and explain the future plans as you know them to the board?
I would hope that all of you have a smaller version of this in front of you.
We do not.
They do not, okay. What we're here to discuss today is in fact the Aquinas Hall application, which is over here on the southern-western side of campus. This would be Ward Place. This would be Wilden Place.
Mr. Gremy, maybe I could interrupt up to you for a second.
That would be helpful.
And give this out, which is a rendered master plan, a rendered drawing of the university buildings that you could look at and follow. We'll mark this A2.
It's not the same plan, it's just the building. It's a near something made up.
All right,
So-
just for the record, the drawing that has been distributed to the board has been marked as A2, and it's not the master plan itself, but it does show the Stafford Hall and Aquinas Hall on there, and it shows the other buildings. I think you could follow the testimony by looking at that.
For the sake of orientating you, you'll see and I'll put the document A2 that matches what you have in front of you up in a second. But Aquinas Hall is the residence hall built in 1971, which is right here on, as I indicated, on the corner, near the corner of Ward and Wilden. And the Stafford Hall is a building constructed in circa 1880, which is embedded in the center of campus. If any of you are familiar with campus, there is a four-sided clock as you walk from the parking garage to the center of campus. And if you were to look to your left as you're doing that, you would see Stafford Hall. Now, with your permission, I'll move to the document you have in front of you. The building known as Stafford Hall, well, maybe I jump ahead of myself. Staying with the master plan, the university established the plan, for the most part, in 2007. There have been two principal changes to that. One is the university center, addition of the university center, and the other was the fitness center. The rest of these buildings you would see on that original document, which may have been submitted during earlier applications. As has been discussed, our master plan is an iterative document, and it often changes both not only with a change in priorities, but in the case of right now with the University Center versus these two buildings, it's a matter of availability of fundraising. In particular, the University Center now will become the centerpiece of a new capital campaign, which is being formulated as we speak. So at this point in time, what the university is doing is moving forward with what would have been the next projects, and that's the Aquinas Hall and the classroom building known as Stafford Hall. Again, Stafford Hall constructed in, and one more business, and I was asked to address some of the parking issues. Based on a formula that the university had been given perhaps in excess of 15 years ago, we were told to annually submit a report as to the head count of students and employees versus parking spaces. Based on that formula, the university should maintain a 1-to-4 ratio. In fact, we exceed that ratio by 400 spaces. The ratio would indicate that we need 2,100 spaces, and in fact, we have 2,479.
Mr. Garabedian, maybe you could just go to the master plan and just tell the board about the principal future plans, I guess starting with the University Center and the other elements that are on the plan.
Well, the University Center, which you're all familiar now with the existing University Center, was constructed, and I'll go very briefly in this because this will be a subject of a future meeting, was constructed in the early 60s, and it is a monument to 1960 architecture. Chrome glass, it had turquoise panel under the window. Energy was cheap, everything was single pane. There was very glass, very little insulation, terrazzo throughout. It is clearly dated, and as any of you, even if you don't have children who have gone to college, you know that there is quite a bit of competition in terms of universities looking to provide creature comforts. Seton Hall, as a private institution, is not interested or able to chase providing jacuzzis and steam rooms and throughout all of its residence halls. Instead, we're focusing more on some of our academic directions. But in fact, a university center is in fact the living room and dining room of any campus. And so that is why you'll see that plan coming forward in the future. Plus the fact that the building has become very difficult to maintain and costly, and there's been a decision to seek funding so that we can move forward on that plan.
All right, so now the existing University Center and Duffy Hall and existing building, they will come down, is that correct?
Yes,
And be replaced with the new building?
right. That's correct.
Okay. And now there's a plan to increase the parking deck, is that true?
There is. Despite the fact that our parking deck and our formula indicates that we should have a comfortable gap with additional 400 spaces, we all know that it's human nature for people not to want to be hunting for a parking space. We want our students and our employees to be able to find parking as near as possible to where they might be working or taking classes, but in fact not spend hours looking for a parking space. And at certain hours of the day, that becomes a challenge during the middle of the week. So that's why the university is seeking to expand the parking garage as you may know it as it exists. Now you'll see on the master plan, and again, to the point that this is an iterative document, there are actually two thoughts that we've had in the past in terms of expanding the parking garage. It's not as if we intend to do both. It's at the point that we submitted the plan to you, we were showing both. At this point in time, in May, the Board of Adjustment will be seeing an application that will be speaking to an extension of the parking garage that runs along Ivy Hill Park.
All right, and those are the two principal items that are not before the board this evening, correct?
That's correct.
There are other items there that are more doubtful?
Doubtful, sir. There are other items that say on the plan, you had the fitness center, you had to fill in another one of our classroom buildings, which with the extension of Stafford Hall would not appear to be necessary. And Then there's some properties off campus that we are looking at or have made application for.
All right. So principally, members of the board, the University Center and the parking deck are the major elements of Seton Hall expansion presently contemplated. And would that be something that you would think over the next 5 years? Would that be a fair statement, or?
I can't imagine both from the ability to achieve this construction as well as from a fiscal perspective that we could consider any more than these two projects.
All right. Now,
So the answer would be yes.
all right. So maybe before Mr. Garbini goes back and has any further testimony regarding the present application, which is Stafford and Aquinas, if there are any questions regarding the master plan? Is that all right, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, sure. We have
Okay.
Ben.
I'm curious if the thinking behind the development of the plan had to do with replacement for the current level of student population, or a potential increase in the student population.
Well, the classroom buildings, well, first of all, we have, as I implied, in the middle of our campus, a building that was constructed in 1880, and it is, we've kept it presentable, but the building is difficult. We can't put any heavy load-bearing classroom in it because the floor is soft. It just, we considered the possibility of trying to renovate it. So the answer is no. We knew we had to do something because we can't have a building like that in the center of campus that is not both attractive and functional. The idea that we're going to add these 12 additional classrooms, I mean, we can always use more classrooms. As you'll see when in the application and the testimony that will follow, there's one large classroom and there's a number of smaller classrooms. It allows more flexibility for the faculty. These are going to be high-tech classrooms, and it just gives us more agility. To the point of both the expansion of because I know I'm guessing where you'll go with that, is the expansion of the residence hall as well as classroom space. We hit a low point in 2007 in terms of enrollment. We struggled with some issues in terms of entering classes. We struggled with some issues in terms of both balancing quality and quantity, and as a number of our sister institutions, we were getting into a tuition discounting war. Long story short, we were fluctuating from goals, budget goals of about $1,250 or enrollment goals of $1,250 or more, and we were dropping down into the $1,125, $1,150, and 2 years ago, 970 students.
These are about first-year students.
First-year students. So this past year, to be candid, we made a number of changes, and in fact, we were able to bring in a much larger class and not only maintain quality, but in fact increase quality. So our issue now, taken aback by our success, is now to stabilize that and continue to bring in an even number of 1,250 students, which would then, once these fluctuations have stabilized, should allow us to be able to maintain a status quo enrollment.
So your long-term goal is to maintain 1,250 freshmen on an annual basis for the foreseeable future. This may enhance it, but this is not predicated on enlarging that number.
No.
Thank you.
Michael.
Since you've mentioned student population, Can you give me the number, or give us the numbers on what your present full-time student population is during the day, what your student population is in the evening, and what the overlap is? Because obviously some will...
I wasn't...
And again, and the last part is, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. President, is what is it projected for the next couple of years?
Well,
I heard what you said.
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, and I apologize. Graduate enrollment for us has been very difficult. The competition with the state institutions, the elimination of reimbursements for whether it's schools or employers has forced students to look at options in the public schools. Seton Hall looks to maintain its niche as a private Catholic, and that's why our focus is, in fact, to maintain a stable undergraduate enrollment. Again, I'm sorry I don't have those numbers in front of me right now, but the overlap might include in some of these traditional day students that are undergraduates may be back to attending evening courses or early evening courses, as well as even weekend courses, particularly the laboratory courses, which would then require them to come on both Fridays and Saturdays, which is in fact why maintaining a residential population is also important, because if you have a commuter population, not only are you putting more pressure on your parking lots, but you're also making it more difficult for those students to attend classes in the evening as well as on weekends.
Could you get us those numbers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one question before Janine, in regarding to the parking with your total students? Is that for part-time and full-time is your total?
Total, part-time, it's a
Part-time,
head
full-time,
count.
graduate, and
It's
undergraduate?
It's a head count of students, part-time, full-time, graduate, as well as a head count of employees, part-time and full-time, adjunct, etc. And may explain why it's a 1-to-4 ratio.
Any other questions on the...
Just
Janine?
one. My question was, is it your projection that including the future demolition and reconstruction of the University Center and whatever else is in your master plan, that you will continue to meet the 1-to-4 ratio with an expanded parking deck?
Yes.
Okay.
Meter
The-
exceed.
Yes, there'll be some growth in that number as we've evened out a class such as the one 2 years ago that entered at 970 students, and replace it hopefully with highly qualified classes of 1250. So that number may go up, and our concern is to whether it's housing or whether it's parking. In the past, when we've had larger number of students on campus, and particularly in the early 2000s, we saw more pressures on the parking on the street, more pressures on students living renting in homes, and the issues that were created with that. Where also, which is a concern for us, is as parents come to campus and are looking at Seton Hall as an option, they want to know that their child, they often will speak in terms of is guaranteed housing. We sit and know that we can almost guarantee that by year 2 or 3, Johnny or Susie is going to want to leap into an apartment somewhere. But when you're speaking to the parent, you need to be talking to them about how much housing you have available. So it's our intention that these two projects will help ease the the discussions and about the facilities we have to offer. The university center will be an attractive option for people who are looking at university centers at other schools that are amazing, and I think it will make us more competitive, which I think is important not only for Seton Hall survival, but that of commuting at large.
Okay, thank you. Go on.
Okay, Mr. Garbini, you talked quite a bit in your discussion about Stafford. Would you talk a little bit about what the goal is on Aquinas?
With the Aquinas Hall, we were surprised and pleased to find out that the building, after studies were done, would be able to handle a fourth level. That, not only a fourth level, but then if you look at the document that we gave you, off around, if you look at it as the letter C, as the letter C is closing on itself, you'll see a lighter tower. That will be another addition, total addition, 4 stories high. That will principally include ADA and handicap rooms. You'll also see next to number 2, to the right of that on the document we gave you, that is an entrance, which is both a security entrance, but it's also an elevator tower. The elevator tower, currently this building, even though it's 3 stories high, is not an ADA accessible. None of the levels are accessible by wheelchair. So that addition, that foyer, that I think you even see in your pictures, will in fact have a dual elevator service to it to provide access to all floors for the building.
I don't have any more questions for Mr. Garbini. And
Dan?
You noted that the newer section of this building would be primarily ADA. Do you have any concerns about the potential implication that that's segregation?
No, I don't believe that's, first of all, it would be segregation if it was only inhabited by ADA. All of our housing, newer housing, has in fact ADA handicap accessible rooms. Depending on the individual's handicap, they come, as you know, in varying different ways, whether it's hearing, vision, or mobility. In fact, only mobility students who are impaired or challenged from a mobility perspective would be in that space. And in fact, we are making that area handicap accessible, but I can assure you that it'll only be used as needed, and the students will be commingled with able-bodied students.
So that would mean that on the existing 3 floors, you're not proposing any renovation that would meet ADA standards, and ADA would only be in the new section and on the 4th floor of some section.
That's true, because in fact the size of the rooms and the bathrooms and the doors wouldn't really allow that. So we would be meeting the need in this building, I repeat, in this building, because as I indicated earlier, the buildings that were built in the 80s, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the buildings that were built in the 80s all had handicap accessible bathrooms and doorways. So It's just because we are building this building now that we're adding this as a feature.
Just a thought.
Okay.
Mr. Garbini, do these plans get reviewed by any governmental agency?
They do.
Who reviews them?
This one is with the DCA is reviewing this, and this is consistent with their requirements.
That's State Department of Community Affairs.
That's correct.
They review educational institutions.
Yes.
Okay. And no other questions of this witness? We're ready for other witnesses.
Do you want to open it to the public for this witness?
Sure, that's a great idea. Do we have any questions from the public for this witness? Come on up. You have to come up, state your name. Always good.
Hi, John Gay. I'm a resident of 10 Elm Court. Is this open to the University Center, or we're just discussing the
Just
master
this
plan?
particular application, which is Stafford and Aquinas, and just this particular part of the testimony.
Okay. That's it.
Come back later. Thank you very much. Okay, so we can hear another witness.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call Mr. John Diacento, who is the engineer.
Very good.
I just mangled his name, and I apologize for that.
Well, we can
I
hear
think I was the first.
We can hear it from the horse's mouth, and then we'll figure it out. We state your name, and
Back to the mic.
when you come back to the mic, we'll hear your own name and your credentials. Stand up. Okay, so.
Could you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll give this evening is the whole truth?
I do.
Please state your name and spell it. And
John DiGiacinto, DiGiacinto, with Langen Engineering.
Langen's address on the plans.
Yes.
All right, Mr. DiGiacinto, are you a licensed engineer?
Yes, I am.
All right, and how long have you been licensed?
About 14 years now.
All right, and have you appeared before boards and given expert testimony?
Yes, I have.
All right. And
This was my first board 14 years ago.
All right, well, I hope nobody remembers that.
What was that?
She's probably the only one that's here.
You're clear. And did you supervise the preparation of the plans for this application?
Yes, I did.
All right. All right, would you, without repeating anything Mr. Garbini said, would you go through the plans for the board?
We'll certify him. Okay, accept his testimony.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll do my best not to repeat too much and get to the important things.
And please speak in the microphone at all times.
As you're aware, we have two projects, Stafford Hall and Aquinas Hall. I'm going to start with the Stafford Hall plan. To look at the site plan, CS 101, which is included in your set of drawings. As you heard, this is a replacement of an existing structure. This structure butts up against Marshall Hall, President's Hall. It's kind of hidden in the campus. We also have Lewis Hall down on the south side. The existing building footprint is approximately 5,700 square feet. The new building footprint is on the order of 8,000 square feet. The primary increase in the footprint size is this lobby space, which is going to be providing access to the building as well as handicap access, which I don't believe this building has at this time. As part of the site improvements that are going along with this, there's some reconfigurations of the walkways, all tying back into where the clock tower is. Stamped asphalt at the entrance, and then some reconfigurations down on the southeast portion, which actually ends up leading into Lewis Hall. Sorry.
Mr. Coakley, I'd like to mark these if we're going to use these. I'd like to mark these as an exhibit, please.
Yes.
Okay.
This would be A3, could you just describe this?
Sure, this is, A3 will be the site plan prepared by Langen Engineering, drawing CS 101, last revised March 28th, 2013.
I'm sorry, what was the date?
March 28th, 2013. Am I speaking up to the mic or so you guys can hear it?
So we both,
Okay.
we need to hear as
When you
well as
bend
the
down,
TV.
it's tough to hear you.
I wasn't sure if the mic was working speakers.
Right, that's,
It is.
that mic is actually not amplified into the space, it's just
Okay.
going into.
The mic's only doing that? Gotcha.
It's just going into the
But I
TV.
thought it was the right one.
So project to you guys and use this to back it up.
Thanks.
Okay, apologize for that. So as I said, there's a slight increase in the footprint size on the building. There's also a slight increase in the height of the building. Both the existing and the proposed are 3 stories. However, this building will be 50.5 feet, relatively speaking, to the main roof. There's also a decorative chimney element that takes it up to almost 57.5 feet. That is in compliance with the ordinance based on the positioning of this building. It's well off of all the property lines. This building could actually be allowed to go to 75 feet, so we're well under the maximum height and in compliance.
Right, and now this building will be accessed purely by pedestrian traffic, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, it's only for student classrooms.
All right, now, with respect to Aquinas, would you give a general description of that building? And this would be A4 we're looking at, is that correct?
Yeah, A4 will be the Aquinas Hall expansion site plan. Again, drawing CS 101, last revised March 28th, 2013.
Give the board a description of that building and its principal site plan elements.
Sure. As was mentioned before, there are technically 3 additions to this building. We have the front lobby addition, which is approximately 2,300 square feet footprint. We have the 4-story addition of residential units. That's approximately 3,600 square feet. And then there will be a 4th floor overbuild on the 3-story building. The existing footprint on that building is approximately 21,500 square feet. The overall footprint with that addition, with the 2 additions, will be 27,600 square feet. Obviously, the height of this building is increasing. We're going from 3 stories to 4 stories. The existing building is on the order of 32 feet, plus or minus in height. With the 4th floor addition, the building will be 44.5 feet in height. The building, based on the setback requirements, the existing building is close to the southern property line, shown here next to Seton Drive. There's a 59.1 foot setback, which is the minimum distance this building gets to the property line. With that, the allowable height on this building for the ordinance would be 73.5 feet. And as I mentioned, we're going to only to 44.5 feet.
All right. Now, with respect to these buildings, have you been in discussion with Omlin Engineering about stormwater issues?
Yes, one of the items that was raised in their review letter was that further discussion need to be held on stormwater. I've had discussions with their office, including Eric Keller and a couple other staff, and I had a brief discussion with Frank before the meeting. We are reevaluating the stormwater. We're going to be submitting revised calculations. Those revised calculations will be in full compliance with the zoning ordinance.
Let me me just try to ask you a question about how much new footprint comes from these buildings. In the Gruel report, it's the footprint of Stafford is increasing from 5,600 to 7,999. So is that approximately correct?
That's correct.
All right, so it's a relatively small footprint increase in terms of stormwater?
Yes.
All right, and with respect to Aquinas Hall, what's the footprint increase approximately?
The footprint increase is about 6,045 square feet.
All right. And so there are various ways to handle stormwater from these buildings, is that correct?
Yes, we are going to be looking at each of the buildings individually, modifying the stormwater management systems that were actually included on the plans so that they provide the reduction requirements that are in the ordinance as well as match the state requirements. And the reason there was some confusion, I guess, on our end about whether these were major developments or not, based on the discussions with Omlin and with Sal Renda, these are all going to be considered major developments. So that's why the reductions are incorporated into the design, or will be incorporated into the redesign that we're preparing.
Okay. All right, now with respect to the Omlin review letter, have you gone over that?
Yes, I have.
All right, so the only matters, Mr. Chairman, that we'll address are the matters that where testimony has been asked for or where the comment needs discussion. Is that okay with you?
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Coakley, is that the letter of April 5th?
Yes, that's the letter of April 5th from Omlin Engineering signed by Mr. Keller, I believe. It's not something, it's from Mr. Keller. It's a memo. All right, so directing your attention to page 3, comment 5 under Aquinas. Do you see that one?
Yep.
All right. You want to discuss that?
Okay. Yeah, on the prior submission that we had made, we made two submissions. We made the original submission in which some comments were made about the completeness. Those were addressed in this resubmission made in March 28th, which should be the plans that you all have for review and which these letters were based on. So in the prior submission, there had been a masonry wall surrounding two sides of a proposed transformer location. That's over here on the, I guess, northwest corner of the residential addition. A decision was made to remove that masonry screening wall. It's important to note that this is internal to the campus and there are essentially no views from adjacent properties. So we don't feel that that is a negative impact on the neighborhood in any way.
So, and then now number 6, does that point up an error in calculation? Is that correct?
Yeah, there was some miscalculations and some confusion between the architectural and site civil drawings. The prior original submission had a footprint of 2290 for this lobby addition. This new lobby addition actually is 2,330, not 3,000, as identified here. So there's actually a 40-foot increase, 40 square foot increase since the last submission. And that ties back to the comment about some discrepancies between the architectural and the engineering plans. What happened is a sort of notch in one of the corners of this lobby was actually removed and squared off, and that's where the 40 feet got picked up. The architect's going to be submitting revised plans when we submit to address all these comments. Those, both the site drawings and the architectural drawings will be coordinated and identical.
All right, now number 8, it talks about a manhole. Do you see that comment?
Yes.
Yes. What's your response to that one?
Based on discussions, we do not feel it is necessary. We will have more direct talks with Omlin because we have not directly talked to them about this issue. The clean out that we're proposing should be adequate versus installing a manhole.
All right. Number 12 and 13, They asked whether you need certain permits.
Yes.
Yes, you do need a sewer permit, is that correct?
We definitely need the sewer permit, which we will be applying for after approval has been granted. And we're going to confirm whether or not the water permit is needed. If needed, we will be submitting for that.
Okay, then I'd like you to drop down to number, all the others are, comments are accepted.
Excuse me, you said all the other comments, are you talking about also on the stormwater management report comments?
Well, no, that was
Yes.
discussed. In other words, any comments that are not addressed are accepted.
Those first two stormwater comments in the memo were what I was referring to earlier when I talked.
I'm sorry,
Sorry,
Counselor,
go
I
ahead.
don't understand that. If you say any comments not addressed are accepted, are you accepting the recommendation on stormwater for a more holistic approach? I mean,
That hasn't been, I think the testimony was, Mr. Miller, that hasn't been decided yet.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that correct, Mr.?
That would be correct.
We
Okay,
are-
I just wanted to
Yeah,
clarify.
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, up to number 19, comment 19 on Stafford Hall, is that correct?
Yes, that comment actually confused me. It took me a little while to figure out what he was talking about, but it does appear that we drew an extension of a curb line over an existing walkway, which we will obviously remove because that's not going to work.
All right, so you are putting in new sidewalk there, is that correct? Or-
Yeah, there's new we're widening some of the sidewalk to be able to provide passage to Lewis Hall. So there's a existing curb here that's moving over about 4 feet. And I think it was just a drafting error that it got extended around the corner it shouldn't have.
All right, comment 21 relates to stormwater, and so is your testimony the same as to that?
Yes.
Okay. What about comment 25?
I believe the architect's going to address that in a little more detail, but I do know from our discussions that there is lighting on both these projects at the lobby, which may not be shown on our landscape and lighting drawings, but there is additional building-mounted fixtures to provide the light at the entries.
All right, and I jumped over 24, that there's a consideration of eliminating the trench drain. You see that comment?
Yes, yeah, there's a proposed trench drain by the entrance to Lewis Hall. We're going to look at it in a little more detail. We may replace the trench drain or we may potentially leave it, but we will provide the details necessary if we do decide to leave it there.
All right, so, Mr. Chairman, subject to, the few comments that he made, some of them need to be further discussed with Alma, and, other comments Alma made are all accepted. All right, now have you gone over the higher rule report as well?
Yes, I have.
Just before you start with that, Frank, do you want to have any comments on his assessment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I generally can't argue with compliance with our requests.
Can't argue.
Comment number 5, Mr. DiGiacinto, was it your testimony that having the transformer exposed on the interior of the campus would not have any negative impacts?
It would not have any negative impacts on the surrounding property was my actual statement, like surrounding neighbors.
And would you
I don't-
offer...
I don't feel it would have negative impacts on the campus. No one's ever going to say transformers are pretty, but they're needed. This is also, just so you're aware, in an area where there are several other existing transformers that are feeding various buildings. So the idea was to try and keep it in that area rather than finding another location.
Is it visible from the neighbors at all?
It is not, based on these locations here, you're basically surrounded by Aquinas Hall, then you have Corrigan Hall. From what I can tell, it would be nearly impossible from any street around the campus to see any of these transformers.
Okay, now,
Hold on, Mr. Chair, I would defer to the board, but parents touring the campus, you know, would it, just because there's an existing unattractive transformer or utility accessory structure in that area, does another one in close proximity, should there be some type of screening?
is that a rhetorical question?
Well, I would also, just to jump in, I would also note that our memo had a similar comment with respect to that, and that the previous plans actually did show screening of the transformer, and that the revised plans took out the screening around the transformer. So we had a similar question.
How big is this transformer? Size of a car?
I don't know the details, but I almost say off the record, even though we're on the record, 8 by 8. But that could be
That's
bigger
in
than
the
it's
plan,
actually
how
gonna be.
high?
4 or 5 feet. I spoke to the applicant while this was being discussed. They have no objection to landscape screening, which would be the installation of, you know, vegetation as opposed to a fixed hard wall to sort of screen off this area and take away the focus of it.
Year round? That's good.
Yeah, it would be some sort of an evergreen type planting as opposed to flowering.
All right, we'll make a note of it. All right. You done, Frank? Thanks, Frank. Okay, going on to the higher rule report, if you would. Directing your attention to page 2, the table on page 2. Do you see that?
Yes.
All right. And under Aquinas Hall, it is said that the existing square footage of that building is 53,376 square feet, and the proposed is 108,373. Is that what it says?
That is what it says, correct.
All right. Now, starting with the proposed, is the proposed number of 108,000 plus, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
All right. And the 53,000, which Ms. Gruhl took from our submittal, is incorrect. Is that so?
Correct. There was actually a miscalculation with that number.
We miscalculated the existing square footage of the building. What is the approximate existing square
The
footage?
approximate existing is 63,000, plus or minus. I don't have the exact number in front of me. The proposed additions are just over 43,000. So obviously, you can deduce from that we're talking about 65,000 for the existing building.
All right. So the fourth floor plus the lobby area equals an addition of square footage of about 45,000 square feet.
Yeah, it
Is
would
that
be
correct?
the lobby, the vertical addition, as well as the fourth floor overbuild.
All right, and does this answer a question further on that she raised in her report about this question?
Yep, it was question number 10, directly related to this miscalculation.
Okay. Does the error with respect to the existing condition have any effect on this application as submitted?
No, it does not. The proposed numbers are correct, and those are where all the building coverage and floor area ratios are developed from.
Okay. All right. Now moving on to page 3 of Ms. Gruhl's report, you see the category minimum distance between buildings.
Yes,
Are those existing conditions?
yes, the 30 feet is existing conditions.
So in other words, you're not in any way diminishing the distance between any building.
No, we are not.
All right. And in the ordinance, is there a difference between buildings in Special District A and buildings outside of Special District A?
Yeah, the Schedule 2 table identifies minimum distance between buildings only in the Special A district. That requires a 50-foot This project, both of these projects are actually outside of the special aid district.
All right, so, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we need to get into the details of that, but it would seem in the ordinance that there's no limitation with respect to distance between buildings as to this part of the campus. So, but in any event, it's an existing condition, it's not being increased. Same basic issue is raised on page 4 regarding Stafford Hall, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
All right, could you just explain the facts to the board?
Yes. The existing Stafford Hall is actually, the main portion of this space between the two buildings is 12.5 feet. There is a pinch point where Lewis Hall bumps out that reduces that separation between the buildings to 9.7 feet in the existing conditions. In the proposed conditions, this Stafford Hall is actually extending slightly, about 1.5 feet to the south, which is reducing this separation between the new Stafford and Lewis Hall to a typical distance of 11.1 feet, but at the pinch point where Lewis Hall comes out at an angle, which is one of the doorways to the building, the closest that gets to Stafford is 6.4 feet. I should say the closest Stafford gets to that is 6.4 feet.
All right, so is it your testimony that whatever changes are occurring are de minimis?
Yes.
And again, it's the same issue as to whether or not the 50-foot setback variance applies to this part of the campus.
Correct.
All right, going on to page 5 of the Higher Grove report. In paragraph 2, there's a discussion of this so-called alley. You see that?
Yes.
All right, could you explain that to the board?
Yeah, the alley space is, again, this space between the two buildings that was roughly 12.5 is going down to about 11. Excuse me. I think some of the way the comment is written, it seems like there's some concern about this space and the connection into the internal space on the west side of Stafford Hall. This internal space is what's commonly referred to as the priest courtyard, which is a private space. It's not used by students or visitors. And additionally, the intention of this alleyway is not to provide access into here. Any existing or proposed gates here are really just for maintenance access, not for visitor or user access. We do show a fence and a gate here. This gate's going to be locked and only opened by maintenance. I know there's some concern about that Stafford's getting taller, the space is getting a little tighter. I'm sure as you're aware, the travel of the sun, Stafford really doesn't have much of an impact on creating more shade in that space. That space is already tight and shaded, and most of that comes from Lewis Hall, because sunlight travels around, not to the south side, not the north side. I don't know if there's any more information I need to provide on that one.
All right. Do you need any kind of fence or anything like that?
We do have a fence keeping this area inaccessible.
Okay. Okay, that's the point.
Yes.
Okay. All right, now, members of the board, with respect to items 3 through 9 on pages 5 to 6 of Ms. Gould's memo, I think Mr. Garbini has covered them all in substance, so I won't have any questions of this witness about them.
I just have a question to our board attorney. which comes first, the chicken or the egg? I mean, in reading 3 through 9, it talks about a master plan being presented and approved, and yet we're hearing application without a master plan being approved. So what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
I would defer to our planner.
May I just make one comment? In the past, when a master plan has been presented together with an application, because that's always what brings it about, boards have previously approved the master plan and the application at the end of the hearing.
It appears that the common practice, I'm sorry. It appears that the common practice, actually, we were a bit confused about this matter as well, knowing that within the ordinance that there is a requirement for a master plan to be approved by this board. And it appears as though what has happened is, at least in more current applications, that there has been, one of the sheets has been submitted with the application that is entitled master plan, and it reflects whatever the overall campus plan is, plus whatever is being submitted as part of the development application. It appears, and again, this is just what we've seen or what we've identified, is that when the board approves the application, that as part of that, that since it's one of the sheets, that has been approved as well. Whether that was the intent, whether that is technically complies with the ordinance, I'll defer to the board attorney on that.
Before he answers that, what components are in that master plan, whether it's approved per application or not?
Excuse me?
What components? What would we be looking at specifically?
You would be looking at...
Basically a site plan with new applications put on it.
It would be somewhat similar to what's been presented as, is that A2? A2 or A1?
A1 is the master plan of the University Center.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
A1 represents
Well, it's a
the master plan that was submitted as part of the University Center application.
It tends to be, it appears to be a hybrid of A1 and A2.
Is that including the deck expansion?
The expansion is identified on here.
But it's basically just identifies projects. It has no more information than that. So
No.
Why? I mean, so it's not a very useful tool per se. I mean, it's not. It doesn't have a lot of significance other than it's a sort of a glorified site plan with additional projects in it. So I'm not sure what it would be telling us.
It is similar to what I would call not only a master plan, but also, to a certain extent, a capital facilities plan. A capital facilities plan, what I'd call light. It does give some, and the intent was to give some direction as to what kind of capital improvements the university is looking to do in some future, and put it all together in a comprehensive way so that when the development applications come in, as well as when the village plans and does their master plan, that they can take into consideration any future projects and any significant expansions. And it goes to square footage, and that kind of translates to what's been going on, which is, does it mean future enrollment and what impact does that have? Similar to when the Board of Ed comes in with their capital facilities planning, which they need to come to this board annually as part of the municipal land use law. They have to provide a basis for what, and coordination as to what they propose for capital planning as such, and what enrollment and what they see and such. So it's got a similar track. It's not as
Right. It's somewhat similar to the MLUL Article 31 review in that regard.
Yes.
It's a bit of an advisory recommendation type of process,
yes.
as opposed to an approval process.
Exactly. It is. It is informational. It is another piece of information that the village can factor into its long-range planning, because the university as well as schools are very important in terms of moving forward how the village progresses.
Right. And unlike a normal, or a typical municipal master plan, we're not talking about the goals or objectives necessarily, because the ordinance says it's zoned for university use.
Exactly.
It has a floor area ratio that's defined in the ordinance. It has bulk requirements defined in the ordinance. So to that extent, that's set in stone, yes. And the master plan becomes more of an informative, informational tool.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just reading 92-143, and it says you have to approve a master plan. I didn't write the darn thing, but I'm just reading what
How often do we have to approve that?
Hiram Gruhl wrote.
Well, exactly, because that's what the ordinance says. How often? It's supposed to be annually. However, when an application comes in from Seton Hall, which Ellen noted has been more frequent, then that plan has been modified accordingly.
Okay.
The other thing I will say is, that, as I understood the ordinance, is that the master plan is to be submitted right when we're submitting this application. Prior to the approval of a site plan, there's supposed to be a submission.
I defer to our counsel on that.
Well, I guess you have to think about what's the purpose of it again. If the purpose is to try to have them provide information about future plans, it seems that we could say, all right, January 1 every year you come in and tell us. But by the same token, it not necessarily bind them to what they tell us in January 1. They may change their plans in February. So while it's informational, it's not binding, and we've got to rely on the ordinance.
I feel comfortable with that.
So is it a fact that if this application is approved, then therefore the master plan is approved?
I would assume the master plan would be adjusted to for this application, therefore, yes.
I agree. I would think that whatever they're presenting with that application becomes the new master plan.
Okay. So the master plan is a flexible instrument.
Very much so.
Well, it also doesn't have that much information on it. It's more like it's just a little site. So that's why I think we have to go by application and by ordinance on each application.
Well, I'm just reading what was written by our planners.
For informational purposes, so you're
Very
aware,
confusing.
Yeah.
the plan
Microphone.
here was submitted as part of...
Microphone, please.
Is it working?
We're getting a light signal that's not picking it up.
Is it on? Okay, sorry. This plan was submitted as part of the University Center. It has, obviously, both of these projects that we're seeking approval for. In the bottom right-hand corner, we have a table that identifies both the floor area footprint as well as floor area ratio. In your applications for Stafford and Aquinas are updated tables that identify updated numbers based on these two applications.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, jumping on to paragraph 10 on page 6 of the rule report. That you've talked about already, correct?
Yes.
You've corrected the...
That's the slight mathematical error.
Okay. And 11 deals also with the mathematical issue. What is the correct number?
The correct number is 6,045 square feet,
Okay.
whereas the site plan, and this is speaking of Aquinas, the two numbers listed here total 5,970. It's just, there was some coordination with the architectural drawings. Like I had mentioned earlier, both of those are going to be reconciled. This plan will be updated, but the correct number, based on discussions with the architect, is 6,045 square feet.
All right. Now, As far as construction of these buildings, when will they start? You know?
I don't know the exact dates. I think we're looking within several months.
All right. And does South Orange have an ordinance that applies to the sequence of construction, timing, that sort of thing?
Yes, it does.
All right. And the university will comply with that ordinance? Is that correct?
They've indicated they will comply with the requirements of the ordinance, the hours, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. Yeah, lighting is discussed in a couple of paragraphs. We'll leave that to the architect. Is that correct, 13, 14?
Yes.
All right. Now, why don't you address 15, 16, 17, 18, which deals with landscaping and matters like that.
Okay. You want to mark these in for exhibits? I don't know what number we're at now. Okay, A5 will be the landscape restoration and lighting plan, LP 101, last revised March 28th, 2013. A6 will be the landscape restoration and lighting plan for Aquinas Hall, LP 101, last revised March 28th, 2013.
Could you repeat those? I was distracting council, so could you repeat those?
Sorry.
A5.
A5 is Stafford Hall Landscape Restoration and Lighting Plan, March 28th, 2013 was the last revision. A6 is Aquinas Hall Landscape Restoration and Lighting Plan, last revised March 28th, 2013.
Thank you.
All right, so 15 deals with landscaping, is that correct?
Yes. The comment basically identifies that there's limited landscaping. At Aquinas Hall, we do have removal and replacement of trees around the proposed additions and the existing buildings. I know one of the comments specifically 17 talks about questioning why some of the trees are being removed. It's our assessment that based on the construction of these additions as well as the Stafford Hall construction and the utility installations, that the existing trees identified as being removed will not likely survive the construction process. We're concerned about impacts on their root systems as well as compactions of soils. So the intent is to remove those and replace those with new trees. Specifically in this area, I think it's clear in this area that these have to be removed to be able to facilitate the construction. Stafford Hall as well has some removals, and again, it's a similar situation where we have utilities and building footprints and reconstruction areas. We feel those trees would have a tough time surviving the construction process.
All right, so are you prepared to work with Ms. Gruhl's office and Almond's office?
Yes.
To improve the landscaping around these buildings?
Yes.
All right, and that's really what's suggested in paragraph 18, is that correct?
Yeah, it's improvements, selection of the right tree species. We'll gladly have discussions with them and come to a consensus on what is appropriate for replacement of what's coming out.
Okay. 19 deals with the discrepancy with the architectural plans, which we said would be corrected. Is that right?
Correct.
20, the architect will handle, correct?
Yes.
Now, 21, a question about how the buildings are serviced. Could you address that?
Yeah, based on discussions with the university, the servicing of these buildings is going to continue as it currently does. I don't know all the details. The university handles refuse removal from the interior of the building. It's stored, I don't even know where on campus, but there's no changes in that. There's no outdoor refuge storage here. I think one of the particular items in this comment was student loading and unloading. Obviously, as semesters change, students are coming and going. Based on discussions with the university's staff, my understanding is they have a very organized structure for the move-in on these buildings.
Like clockwork, they said.
That is the word they used, where they control how many students and which students are allowed to get to the building to do their loading and unloading. And then they switch to the next shift, and they rotate through that in a very orderly fashion. Because obviously, if you try and let everybody race into there at the same time, nothing's going to work. But they do have a well-oiled machine, as I'm told.
So you've addressed the students, you've addressed refuse. What about bicycle racks? That was one of the comments last one.
Yeah, I believe that was 24. There are actually existing bicycle racks basically directly across from the lobby addition in this area. Those are used by the residents as well as other students, and the university has a policy as they see the need for more bike racks or demand for more bike racks, they do install them throughout the campus.
All right, I have no further questions. This witness.
Board, any more questions? Any other questions?
Tom? In looking at the plans, it looks like you're going to be making some road cuts on both county and town roads for utility connections, or?
There will be a connection for Aquinas Hall. There is a water line connection that's going to be coming off of Ward Place.
Which I believe is a town road?
That's a town road, yes.
Okay. Is it your plan after those connections are made, obviously you're going to cut the road?
Correct.
Are you redoing the road, or you're just going to patch?
They will patch not just a trench, but there's also the overlap so that you don't get the sinking. I know exactly where you're going with it.
Yeah, I'm going that way because, I mean, I've seen the road is not in bad condition.
Right.
And very frankly, you're going to cut it and you're going to patch it. There goes the integrity of the road.
It's a brand new road.
All that would be overseen by the municipal engineer or their representative, which could be Omland. They would have to do inspections. They would be reviewing the details that we provide.
Well, I noticed our engineer, both town and Omland, did not comment on that, so I'm going to comment on that. I would expect that to be in whatever is approved, that road will become kind of your responsibility or contributing towards the redoing of that road, especially since it's a relatively new road. That was question one, or comment number one. Comment number two is, based on the sizable expansion, at least I consider it sizable, not so much from a footprint standpoint, but an overall square footage. Are you planning on doing a new traffic study? My guess is with new dorm rooms that you're adding, a new classroom space, I'm guessing when I see the projections, or when the board sees the projections of student population or faculty population increases, you may need a new traffic study. I don't know what improvements may be necessary.
Well, Mr. Miller, I'm sure Mr. Dwyer will tell you, traffic is not an issue for the planning board when a property is zoned for the use proposed.
I'm sorry, when the property is what?
When the property is zoned for the use proposed, people are not required to do traffic studies in those situations because the law contemplates that the governing body in zoning this property for university use, allows the university to use it as such within the parameters of the zoning ordinance, and that it does not become an issue for a planning board to start studying traffic. And so that's a well-recognized principle. So in any event, parking, you have an ordinance, we've addressed that, and it is being addressed in the future, but we do comply. We have submitted information showing compliance. So I think parking and traffic are really dictated by those parameters.
Pat, is that correct, or?
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I find that a little
the
incredulous.
board has the right to ask, does it not, Mr. Coakley, for more information that's relevant?
Well, but under the Lionel case, traffic is not an issue that the board can pursue when there's no use variance sought, and maybe not even when there's a use variance. But certainly that's the law in New Jersey with respect to traffic.
Is it part of the applicant's position that the improvements are internal in a self-contained campus?
Yes, certainly. I think. Well, I mean, there's always a need to go to the county planning board anytime you do a project on a county road, and there's an effect on a county drainage facility. I'm not sure whether there is in this case. Is there?
In this case, no.
Okay. We have traditionally gone to the county on every project, and they normally say they have no
Have you been to the
interest.
county yet on this one?
Not yet, no. We normally go after the planning board approves.
Sorry, the applications have been submitted to the county.
We haven't been heard by the county.
There were documents, I believe, one document submitted for traffic on this, prepared by our office, identifying that Stafford does not increase traffic, obviously because we're only providing classrooms for the existing student population. And additionally, I believe there was some information provided regarding how the expansion of Aquinas bedrooms relate to the student population, and I don't have all the details on the top of my head, but who uses that facility. I think primarily it's freshmen that are not allowed to bring cars on campus.
The expansion of Aquinas would actually diminish traffic.
Part of the thought of that is students are on campus now instead of commuting to campus.
Our position is both legally and more importantly, I think for the board, factually, this would not be a matter that would merit a traffic study.
I just want to ask Susan to address the issue about the variance as to why they say it's not required.
Which one, the proximity of the buildings? to each
Yes,
other?
between the buildings.
I'm not sure that they're saying it's not required by either. I think what they're saying, and maybe I misunderstood, that what they're saying is if it's an existing condition that's not being intensified, then a variance is not necessary. However, there is one condition that would reduce the dimension from 10 to about 6 at one point. I believe that this witness has testified as to what the basis of a variance would be, based upon the fact that it's not, at least this is what I heard, that it is not open to the public, that it is not a common walking area for students or for faculty, and that there is actually a fence that limits accessibility in that area. Did I paraphrase what I thought I heard you say?
But is Ellen's question that there's a
that's
need
not
for a
what you said
variance?
about the
Well,
variance
No, but I
between the
think
buildings.
that they were testifying on a variance for that, and that they still think that there's a variance necessary for that piece, but not for...
From the 10 to 6, but not between the buildings because it's not in
Because
the
it's
A
a
zone, it's in the
pre-exist,
university
at
zone.
least for the one building. And that there's no change in the condition.
Well, I didn't think that's why you said that.
Maybe
thought
I
you-
misunderstood.
Well, I actually heard two things myself. I
Yeah,
heard
I thought it was
what
because it wasn't
Susan-
in the A zone, it was in the
50-foot
university
rule didn't
zone, it
apply.
was required.
We should just clarify that.
That's
Can
what I
you-
heard.
Susan, can you clarify, if it was accessible to students, does the situation change? Or I suppose priests aren't don't have the same
Well,
equality.
let's first ask whether we're actually looking at a variance or not, because I heard both things. I heard that you implied that there was no variance required, whether or not, because of there wasn't the...
Again, we all kind of come at this from experience. There is a section in the ordinance that requires 50 feet between buildings. But as I read the footnote, it's limited to the Special District A part of the campus.
Right.
So the campus is it's not divided in half, but there's a part that's in a special area. That certainly would require a variance if these buildings were here. I don't know that it's worth arguing about. I think either way, the proof submitted would indicate that the
Right, I
variance
don't
should
think
be
it's a
granted.
big deal about the
Yeah.
variance, I just want
Just
to
wanna
be
know
clear
whether we are asking
if
for
it's
one.
required or it isn't required, so we know what we're doing, that's all. And that's what I thought was the difference, was District A versus University Zone. That was the reason why you were saying it wasn't necessary, because it wasn't in District A. Not that it's already existing, so they don't need it. That's what I just wanted the clarification.
So when we get to the resolution, are we going to say a variance is required that we act on or not?
I will go back and look. We were of the impression that it was. However, I will go back and reevaluate whether that, in fact, is limited to Special District A.
Maybe we should act on
We
it
are,
one way
we
or
are
the other.
prepared to proceed on the basis that it's required, because
Okay.
That's fine.
as we've explained to the board before, there's a certain time issue with respect to
I think we should make that assumption in case, so you don't have to come back in case we find that you do have to make that. All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this witness?
Yes.
Janine?
Just starting with the bike racks.
Yes.
I think we have a requirement in our ordinance for multifamily, and I don't know whether that's covered or not. I thought we covered this kind of institutional use within the ordinance, and bike racks are required. And in fact, I think storage is required. So I don't think the racks outside of the, beyond the lobby comply with the ordinance, although I don't have it in front of me. And definitely the statement, while I appreciated that, the university, as it sees the need, will place more bike racks, we are beyond that here now. So
I think if,
you might need to,
I'm not aware of the ordinance, I will do the research with the attorney. If there is an ordinance, I'm certain the university will comply with whatever the requirements are for
Make that
that.
a condition.
okay, that'll be a condition of the approval.
Well, they definitely,
I mean, if the ordinance applies to a university dormitory, we need to comply with it.
Thank you. And I was wondering if you could explain a couple things in the stormwater. I just want to turn my attention to stormwater. Where you have, for instance, in the Aquinas proposed watershed plan, you have watersheds A1 and A2, and then you have A, B, C. I'm looking, for instance, at proposed watershed data, the pervious and impervious area, and so on and so forth. And I think as well for Stafford, I don't have that sheet open right now, but when you then go forward, bring it forward as to what your proposed is versus existing, does the A1 and A2 or B1 and B2 get folded into the either the A or the B?
yes.
Okay, okay.
I apologize if that's not clear.
No, that's
The
okay.
breakout of B1 and B2 and then merged.
Get rid of that.
That would be workers' comp, Mr. Copeland. I
What
now
would
know
that even be, that?
It's supposed to go to here with the ordinances.
So you can put quote.
So going to the more, I'm kind of mystified by what happened here, and I think this is actually a question more for Omlin than it perhaps is for this witness, but I'm going to ask it of the witness first. I'm mystified by Omlin's deferral on the revised stormwater management reports, which were submitted for both halls until a comprehensive report is prepared, requesting a, the overall stormwater management approach beyond these two. So I've studied, in some detail the approaches for these. I can honestly say that, there's a fair amount of increase in impervious surface, and while you've taken care of it in accordance with current law, which I appreciate, I would have preferred to see, and maybe you just don't have room for it, and that's one thing I would like you to address, because I realize, your campus is getting more crowded, but I would like to have seen a more, a softer approach. You've got a lot of, hard engineered things here, and I think that's one of the things, although I may be wrong, that Omlin was getting to, because you're detaining for, I'm anticipating you're going to be detaining for every little thing, and that, and that maybe we can have a better approach if we looked at it more comprehensively. But I don't know how to evaluate this now. They've deferred on it because they've said a more comprehensive approach.
Right. There's a lot of pieces to this discussion. What we presented in the reports, the revised reports, was a scenario in which we were matching peak runoff rates, proposed as matching existing conditions. That was done based on the projects not being considered a major development and doing a best engineering practice matching. There is no, because we've had discussions and agreed that these are all going to be treated as a major development. The ordinance as well as the state regulations have three, I think the ordinance actually has four, but only three of the options apply to us. One is showing that hydrographs never exceed each other, which is the flow rates. The proposed never exceeds the existing. Essentially, that can't happen if you're adding impervious, because you could not exceed the peak, but you stretch out the time, you've exceeded it at some point. The second option is to match existing flows, which is similar to this, but then to do additional analysis to prove that there are no impacts downstream. That becomes very challenging, because how do you define the limit of downstream? And then the third option is stormwater reductions for the 2, 10, and 100-year storms. We have talked to Eric Keller. He has had discussions with Sal. I believe Susan might have been involved. I'm not sure. No? Okay. So Sal, Eric, I spoke to another staff. I mentioned to Frank. We are going to go with the approach of doing the reductions, and we're going to be submitting revised reports. Now, unfortunately on this property, to use your term, hard is really our only option. We've done geotechnical investigations that are required as part of the structural design, and our team has determined that these soils do not perk water very well. So the problem would be that we would have to have large areas of storage above or below ground, and there's a good chance that they wouldn't percolate quickly enough to meet state requirements, city ordinances, and to function properly. So we've gone with, unfortunately, the hard approach, which is underground systems of pipes that slow down the water, store it temporarily so that we can reduce those peak flows. And that's our proposed direction that we're heading. We've done the preliminary calculations. We can make this work without, having to take up the entire lawn area with detention systems. Actually, the systems that we're proposing are only slightly larger than what's already on the plans. And again, we're going to revise those reports, submit them to the city, have Omlin review them.
Okay. Now, I read all the materials together, not only, read them when they came in, but read them for this meeting. So I think I'm going back to the University Center. Does the University Center incorporate, for instance, rain gardens and so forth? Because I read that in preparation for tonight's meeting, and it's not in these stormwater reports, so.
The University Center primarily has large underground detention systems. We actually have two because the existing drainage flows in two different directions, and you'll hear that at the next meeting when we present. We did incorporate a small rain garden element in the front of the building near the
Okay.
main circle. That was one, to get something in there, knowing that we couldn't do too much, but to try and have some sort of green aspect, as well as to address a scenario we were having problems with the drainage itself, and this was a
Okay.
great way to resolve it.
That's what I thought. Okay, I recall that aspect of it. So it's your testimony that, well, I mean, the soils are, is that just so small that it's almost kind of de minimis because the soils are the same or they're different over by the University Center?
The rain garden, the plantings in the rain garden typically take more water than normal plantings. That's essentially the point of it. There is an underdrain. If this ever gets, if it fills up to a certain point, it still drains
Okay.
into the storm sewer system.
So it's belt and suspenders there?
Right.
Okay. So, so is it your testimony that you can't incorporate any of those softer approaches to these two projects?
It's much more difficult with the small size to get all the numbers to work well. But I'll gladly discuss it with the applicant, look at options. I think with these small areas and the small lawn areas that are available, because the rain gardens tend to become non-usable spaces.
Yeah.
They're decorative but not usable.
Right.
There is limited green space around, particularly Aquinas, which is obviously residential. And Stafford, while it does have some, there's a massive amount of utilities on the east side of this
Right.
building, especially the utility tunnel that provides steam throughout the campus.
Right.
That might prevent us from being able to do something like that.
Okay. And what about the priest's courtyard? Is that part of the watershed associated with the adjoining structure, or that's totally different? 'Cause
No,
I couldn't
actually-
tell that from your.
Most of the priest's courtyard in the existing condition flows to the west.
Okay.
What we're doing, the west wall of the building is actually shifting a little bit east. So when you see the drainage areas, you'll see that the existing actually extends past the proposed. I understand it's confusing because even when I was looking at it, it was a little confusing, but that priest courtyard drains to the west. The existing building, half of the existing building also drains there. We're now bringing that to the front. So we're reducing runoff into that priest courtyard and addressing it through the detention in the front.
Okay, all right. I thank you. I would just ask you to keep in mind not only that we're trying to move toward a sustainable, although structured environment as much as possible, both transportation, drainage, everything.
Okay.
Trip generation, trip reduction.
Understood.
Good. Thanks, Janine. Eli?
Back to the question of softer approaches, did you explore the feasibility of a green roof on the additions to Aquinas Hall?
I can't speak to that because I didn't do the architectural design.
Well, that's the
I
architect.
apologize.
Okay. Board, thank you. Frank, you have one question? No.
I just wanted to clarify, Janine.
Frank, microphone.
Oops, sorry. What we didn't want to do was review those two stormwater reports, knowing that they were going to be revised in a couple of weeks. So that's why, that's what we deferred. We didn't want to spend time reviewing this much when we're going to get new information in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Counsel, I think we're done questioning this witness. Public, yes. I'm just letting you know. Did any of the public have any questions for this witness pertaining to his testimony? Okay, thank you very much. I
Michael Jackson of KSS Architectural.
Okay. Well, it's a senior moment.
many, many, many. 200 years. How can you read this? Where does it go then? So what was your take on
I think Susan, I gotta ask that. The one that talks about distance between buildings is footnote 11, and that's not in the university zone regs.
Is that the bike thing?
I don't think this is old.
What is the codification procedure for, like, if I went down and asked for a new one, would it actually be activated?
No, because I just did that.
Oh, you mean you just got it and it's 6 years old?
I just asked for one.
Steve was bugging us to have a codification meeting with the company that does our thingy.
Online. The online folks?
Well, everything's online, yeah. We didn't hire general code, I think we did.
Sir, could you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you give here this evening is the whole truth?
I do.
Kindly state your name and address for the record.
Michael Shatkin. I'm a member of KSS Architects. The address for that is on the firm. It's 337 Witherspoon Street, Princeton, New Jersey.
And could you please spell your last name?
It's Shatken.
Thank you.
Shatkin, you're a licensed architect?
I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey.
All right, and how long have you been licensed?
I've been licensed for approximately 35 years.
All right, and have you made this type of presentation once or twice before?
I have made this type of presentation over the course of those 35 years, many times.
All right. I'd like to have him recognized as an expert.
we do. Thank you.
in the field of architecture. Mr. Shatkin, did your firm design the Stafford and Aquinas buildings as before the board?
Yes, we did.
All right. You want to just tell the board about the architectural elements of them?
I certainly will. The first image I just wanted to provide is the image of the existing context of Stafford Hall. There are 3 images on the board that are on the top and on the left that indicate views from the left, and there's a 4th image that is on the lower right that indicates the view in the priest garden. The image immediately to The image immediately to my right, which I'm also going to be talking to, indicates the 2 spaces that exist on the campus, which I think I wanted to discuss in the context of the siting of the building, because the building, in terms of how it's sited and its position and its proximity to other buildings, essentially defines what I think everyone is familiar with on college campuses, the wonderful quadrangles and intimate spaces that exist. In one case, we've described the priest's garden. A little less description this evening has gone into the other space, which is the space that exists between Stafford Hall, Mooney Hall, and between the library building. And that's a sort of a major connection point between where students enter the campus vehicularly, leave their cars, and they travel to the green. And in both cases, those spaces are, I'll say, well-defined, intimate spaces, and they're largely dependent upon the buildings that surround those spaces. So I think it would really be a detriment to the campus if we didn't maintain that footprint, which essentially defines those spaces. It addresses the issue of the priest garden being a contained space, and it also addresses the issue of the quadrangle that is in front of Stafford Hall also being a contained space. So I just wanted to indicate that it's not a matter of just matching the footprint of the building, but it also does something in terms of site planning which is unique to college campuses and I think should be maintained. With regard to some of the
Pardon me, Mr. Shacker. Mr. Coakley, is that now going to be marked A8, the one on the right?
This has not been marked.
Okay, that's not. How would you describe it?
A8 is a blown-up site plan in the immediate area of Stafford Hall.
And Mr. Shatkin, if we're looking at Stafford Hall, the two buildings on the right, the one in the upper right, that would be Mooney, and the one in the lower right is the library?
Okay. This one is Mooney Hall.
Right.
This is the library.
Right.
This is the Marshall Hall.
Right.
And this is President's Hall. This building in the lower corner here is the power plant and Lewis Hall.
Thank you.
I guess what I would also like to point out is just a little bit more about the architecture of the building in terms of the plan configuration, and I won't spend too much time on that, but I do have a plan. And essentially, the plan addresses some of the issues that have already been discussed. The building is largely in the same area as the existing Stafford Hall, but the building provides 12 new classrooms of a variety of sizes, from 25 to 35-person classrooms to 50 and 75-person classrooms. So there's a variety of state-of-the-art classrooms. The existing Stafford Hall was one of those buildings where there was really no inside there. It was so impractically laid out in terms of bearing wall that it really had reached a point where it had very limited utility. The existing building did also not provide ADA access. The dog leg, or the L in the plan, permits us to provide ADA access not only to Stafford Hall, but to Marshall Hall and to President's Hall on 2 levels. It also improves the emergency egress out of those buildings. There are some fire escapes that serve those buildings, which will be eliminated as a result of this new construction and how the new construction supports the existing building. One of the features in terms of the building, just in terms of how it's laid out, it's a very simple plan. The circulation is on the east side of the building, which is along that circulation course that I described, which students travel to the campus green, and the quieter functions of the classroom are located on the western side of the building. And with that, I'll move to, I think, one of the questions that was raised by the planner is what is the basis, what is the palette for this building, what is the design, and I'll show you a rendering of the building.
For the record, A9 is what we marked as the architectural plan for Stafford. And A10 would be its rendering.
Okay, this is the view of New Stafford Hall, which I think we already indicated was going to be a 3-story high building. The materials and the design of the building is based upon one of the buildings which I think people are most familiar with as one of the more historic and significant buildings on the campus, and that's President's Hall. So in terms of the cast stone, the window treatment, and the water table or the base of the building, all of those features are intended to be compatible with that President's Hall building, which I think people are generally familiar with. As far as the roof material is hopefully a slate, or it could be a simulated slate depending on budgetary considerations. The roof is sloped, which in this case does not lend itself to a green roof, and it's sloped in a manner which has two ridges with space in between that conceals all of the mechanical equipment from view. I think we've already testified to the height of the building, so I won't repeat that testimony. But this is an approximation of the design from the eastern side of the building, and the coloration of the building will be similar to President's Hall.
I think the one issue that was brought up was lighting.
Okay, let me address lighting from the standpoint of what wasn't indicated on the lighting drawings that were prepared by lighting engineers is the lighting that would be provided as part of the building. And at the main entrance of the building, there would be lighting which will be coordinated with laying in site lighting to provide, emergency egress level lighting, as well as the lighting that is continuous lighting pattern between the building and the site lighting poles that already exist for pedestrian circulation. That's true of not only the main entrance that you're looking at, but all of the required emergency egresses, one that faces Lewis Hall and also one that faces the priest garden. They all have supplemental lighting that will be coordinated with the site lighting in terms to provide the required lumens and egress lighting. Sure.
Mr. Chairman, if I may clarify the last comment that was made regarding lighting.
Yes?
Yes.
Sure.
Were you speaking about exterior wall lighting, or were you speaking to lighting that was associated with emergency access?
In all the locations that I was referring to, there'll be both general illumination lighting as well as emergency lighting, and they will be wall mounted on the building, and they will be coordinated with the site lighting.
Exterior wall mounted.
Exterior wall mounted lighting. I'm not referring to freestanding lighting.
Okay. So those will be part of the site plan details, but subsequent to now.
That's correct.
Correct?
That's correct. We will provide them as supplemental drawings and show how they're coordinated.
Okay. Thank you.
The first image I'm going to speak to is just the photos in terms of the existing context for Aquinas Hall. We took various photos surrounding the building, and what's interesting about those photos, it shows essentially the height of the building, its proportions, and also the palette of the building. It's a brown brick building with metal panels. It's on the roof and some spandrel panels in the glass, and it is also, I would characterize, as somewhat of a 60s building, and we've tried to address that with the addition of the fourth floor to provide an update visually to the building as well as the added program elements. We mentioned with regard to this building that there are 164 additional units, that there are 3 additions to the building. One addition is the addition, I hate to do this, but I'm going to add one more exhibit if that's okay.
Okay, well, let's just, for the record, A11 would be the Aquinas existing photo board, is that correct?
That's correct.
And A12 would be the architectural rendering of Aquinas Hall?
That's correct. A11 is the enlarged floor plan.
A12.
A12, rather.
And A13 would be the rendering. No, I guess A12.
What was it, Mr. Coakley?
Yeah.
You lost me.
Record all fouled up.
You lost me.
A12 was the
What was
enlarged site
A12?
plan. Enlarged site plan.
The enlarged site plan, which is right here, which will blow up the site plan in this area.
Right.
A13 is a floor plan of the building, and A14 is the exterior rendering of the building. Sorry about that confusion. Architects think in terms of pictures, and we've got quite a few. But what I did want to point out with regard is that there are three additions to the building. The lobby addition is provided to allow for ADA elevators to enter the building. It also provides for another emergency stair within the building. It provides for additional study and lounge space for students, and it also provides a more gracious and welcoming entrance than what the existing building existing building was currently configured. The On-grade addition represents a total of 32 additional bedrooms. It is a 4-story addition. That is the area where we have located the ADA units, but we painstakingly, to the extent that the existing structure and addition would allow us, have distributed the ADA units as 4 units per floor. So community within these buildings generally exist on a floor-by-floor basis, and every floor within the building has ADA units within it. I've already mentioned that the entire building is now accessible from the standpoint of a route into the building, and there are other ADA features that are provided within individual student rooms in terms of door position and hardware. So from an ADA standpoint, it's not a situation where it's limited to one area of the building. I will point out that the exterior of the building, we raised the building. The third addition is the 4th floor. We raised the building 1 level. We continue to use the metal panel, but it's no longer this little tiny band around, but it becomes the entire 4th floor. We have we've done window replacements to meet energy code, and have managed to make the glass now continuous rather than being interrupted by the metal bands. We provided an entry canopy. We provided more decorative stone at the entrance. So in generally speaking, we've kind of moved the building forward in terms of its architectural style. I would also say within the building, besides the additional rooms, we've kind of repositioned the building in terms of lounge spaces and public spaces. Wayfinding has been addressed within the building, as well as additional lounge and study spaces provided for the benefit of all the students within the space. I think earlier on there was a question with regard to green roofs, and we very much try to embrace green technologies, and we would have liked to put a green roof on this building. But as you might well imagine, when you're vertically expanding the building, there's considerations for weight, and everything we've done with regard to the vertical expansion by using metal studs and metal panels, not masonry, and it's been with consideration to the structural characteristics of the building below. So the inclusion of a green roof in this context would have been difficult or impossible. So we didn't give that much more consideration than the structural test. I'm not sure where. Lights in terms of, again, I would say with regard to the exterior lights, that we have general illumination that is provided at each of the entrance, particularly the main entrance. In addition to that, we have the emergency lighting, and we will provide additional drawings to indicate those lighting fixtures that are building mounted and how they coordinate in lumens with the pattern that is provided for the pole mounted and site lighting that was prepared by Langen.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board? Daniel.
The ADA accessible rooms, 2 questions. One, was there any consideration given to putting some of those rooms on the 4th floor addition, not just in the new building? And 2, are the 4 rooms per floor in the new 4th floor building all contiguous on each floor?
One of the other considerations that we encountered with regard to expanding this building is it's a bearing wall building, which leads us to putting the similar structural elements or room configurations in the same place. And you'll notice on both the floor plan and the site plan where the ADA rooms were provided that they actually bump out because they require more space. We basically felt that we were doing, I'll say, an adequate job with regard to ADA distribution by getting 4 rooms per floor. In the context of an existing building and a structural overbuild, we felt that we were meeting the requirement, and also that it was associated with the community groups that form floor by floor. And there is a proximity of the ADA units. There's many area that is proximity to the elevator and to the main entrance, so we also felt that was another consideration. And the ADA units also exist directly across the hall from the conventional units, and they are also directly adjacent to the units. So we felt that we had done, under the circumstances, a reasonable job. The project will be going to Department of Community Affairs that has an accessibility review, and we will be addressing their comments as well as any comments that we get
I
from you.
appreciate the comments, but the simple answer is yes, they're all clustered.
They are all clustered.
Thank you, that's
yes.
all I asked.
Are you renovating all of the floors as well?
We are renovating the bathrooms and doing finish renovations within all the.
But not the room layout, the rooms are
The
good.
room layouts and configuration of the rooms remain as they currently are.
Eli?
Yes, getting back to your comments about the green roof, I understand that given that you're adding a floor to the existing building, that you certainly would run out of spare structural capacity, but getting back to the comments earlier about soft approaches, according to the master plan, the additions to the footprint of the building are both new pieces of construction. And so, isn't it possible that you could have offset the increased impervious surface by putting green roofs on the additions, which wouldn't have had the existing structural limitations?
I suppose that would be possible.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Well, I'll save that question. Thanks.
Okay. Frank?
I just have one question. There was testimony previously that Stafford Hall was lower, 20 feet lower than what the zone required. Was there any consideration in the new building to accommodate future floors?
In relationship to Stafford Hall, it is not designed to be vertically expanded because of the roof design, the placement of the mechanical system, and also it is currently fitting into the context architecturally of the surrounding buildings. So no, there is no plan to vertically expand that building.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. At this point, if there are any questions from the public for this witness, we will hear you. No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that completes our presentation.
Very good, thank you. Okay, board. Are there any thoughts, or do we have I know if we have a resolution, it's going to be somewhat long-winded because there's a lot of considerations, but would you like to discuss anything? Any other thoughts? If at this point there are any comments from the public about the application in general, you can come up and voice your opinion. This is your time.
It's only related to the things discussed today, not the new universities.
That's correct.
That's going to be for a separate meeting?
I imagine at this point it will be.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Well, does anybody on the board want to make a resolution? Does anybody have the end?
I will move the approval of the application for both Aquinas and Stafford. It will have several conditions to it. The principal ones being compliance with all ordinances, because several came up tonight. There's a couple questions of interpretation, although one of them is a variance. If a variance doesn't need to be approved as a condition, but I'm going to make my motion to include the approval of the variance as well that was discussed back and forth with respect to the proximity between buildings. And I guess in situations like this, we condition the approval upon the satisfaction of the professionals, the village professionals, with respect to stormwater management and
Review of lighting.
the review of lighting, but there was,
Landscape.
what was the more substantive one by the planner?
Landscape.
Landscaping.
Certain revisions to the landscape plan.
Revisions to the landscape, the landscaping of the transformer area.
I think
Landscaping
road
around
cut
the
on the
buildings.
I think the road cut is governed by ordinance, isn't it? Yeah, so when I say compliance with all ordinances, that's gonna be
But it
included
doesn't,
in that.
excuse me, it doesn't have to be. If the ordinance may just say patch, I'm talking about really replacing the road. It's a new road, relatively new road, it's going to be cut.
Whatever the ordinance says is what they have to comply with.
Second.
I don't believe the board has authority to go beyond what the conditions are in the ordinance,
You did with some other developments.
absent a variance request.
Okay.
I think we have a variance request.
I'm
Well-
not so sure there is a variance.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
we don't know
So-
but it doesn't relate to that anyway.
No.
No, it's not related.
By the way, I just want to mention, I agree with Mr. Coakley that although I think it's a terrible idea,
I can't hear you.
although I think it's a terrible idea, I agree with Mr. Coakley that under the Lionel's case and Dunkin' Donuts, we don't have off-site, for this application, we don't have any off-site traffic or circulation. It's out of our province for this application. That's the law. Did I forget
Did I
anything?
anything?
Bike racks and storage.
Well, that's per
Compliance.
ordinance.
Per
Per
ordinance. But we might mention it anyway.
Friendly amendment for
Well, there are a whole host of recommendations from our engineer that I'm assuming they're going to comply with or discuss.
That's
or
that's the testimony that they would, and that's what they're gonna be reviewing and
Yeah, for everything they said they accepted,
gonna
obviously,
do that.
yeah, they're gonna
They're
do
gonna
that.
do
And that may involve revised plans. For everything else, it's gotta be to the satisfaction of our village professionals. Am I right? There's only two categories.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so,
I agree.
so you haven't really disagreed with anything, or if you did, you're going to work to their
Right,
satisfaction?
right, absolutely.
Okay.
Janine, are you also including the approval of the master plan?
I think we should make that a separate
Yeah, that's
resolution.
Not really part of the application, although if the applicant wanted to propose that the master plan submitted in connection with the university application should be adopted by this board as the master plan for the university as of this date,
In compliance with the ordinance. Right.
in compliance with the ordinance. But that's something the applicant would request the board to approve.
Yes, yes.
to do that. Susan?
Just remind them that the architectural plans will be revised to reflect the engineering.
Right.
Agreed.
Frank?
And securing all outside agency approvals.
Goes without saying.
Third
Always do.
increase to be dealt with soft measures or something. Something to move them in that direction.
The what?
Well, yeah, it said like do it on the
We can,
part of the plan.
to encourage them.
What was it?
And how do you feel about a condition that encourages you to look at a roof garden on the new structure at Stafford?
Oh, Aquinas. Aquinas.
Excuse me, Aquinas. Look at as a,
Prolongs the life of the roof.
That gets to what
We'll review that question again.
Okay.
thank you,
Okay.
sir.
All right.
I'd also appreciate getting that information requested on student population, faculty population, et cetera,
know that we-
because they're going to be for us on another hearing. Right.
You know what would be very interesting?
Could make it a condition, but it's a little bit after the fact if it's a condition.
Yeah, Mr. Coakley, because I looked at the transportation numbers, and, you know, you do meet and exceed the standard, and I'm very appreciative of that. But I would be interested, if Seton Hall has any information on this, don't do any extra work, as to what the utilization rate of the parking deck is after, 4 or 5, or, whenever your peak class period ends on weekdays, especially in the middle, because, that probably, that's very useful information for us to know. So it would probably behoove you to tell us that, if you have that information.
If we have it, we'll provide it.
Yeah. I mean, a windshield survey could probably do that pretty quick too.
All right.
Because we have to defend our decision,
I have a question for the board engineer. To what extent are we at this point able to approve a stormwater drainage system for this application and what we know are another application for the University Center, as well as the zoning board application for the parking deck? And what holistic approach is it that you are asking this applicant to provide?
If the board were willing to allow us to continue working with the village engineer and the applicant's engineer, engineering, you can engineer just about anything. I'm sure we can come to a consensus and make it work that would meet, the borough ordinances and the testimony presented tonight.
Okay.
And I would only ask that it all be done before the next hearing on the next application.
That's reasonable.
Is that possible?
I would
It's
defer
up
to
them,
the
but
applicant's engineer on whether
They've
he
already
could
started
get that
it.
information.
They're mostly finished with it, so I think that's
So-
reasonable. Yeah. Not an issue.
just so that we
Okay.
have it in time to review and
Okay.
everything before the next hearing, for the next piece of the puzzle.
We got that.
All right, I know you have a lot of writing to do, Patrick.
I do.
So, given that collage of resolution, I think everybody understands it. Do I hear a second? Okay, roll call.
Okay, Ms. Foy,
Yes.
Ms. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Hutt,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
No.
Reverend Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
No.
and Mr. Goldstein.
Yes.
Does it pass? Sounded like it did.
Yes.
Okay.
5-2.
Thank you, board. Thank you, professionals. Thank you, applicant.
Thank you,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you,
I guess
Chairman,
it's,
members of the board. Do you want to do a motion on the master plan?
you want to do a motion on the master plan now?
Sure. We'll do that right now.
So do I hear a motion on the master plan, which we think we know what it is, but haven't
It
exactly
was-
seen?
It was the exhibit marked as A1, correct?
Okay.
Correct.
That we couldn't see.
Motion to accept the master plan as of tonight that was presented as A1.
Right. That will include next month's application as well.
Are you
Cheers.
making the motion?
Yes.
I'll second it.
Do I hear a roll call? Jettie?
Okay, Ms. Foy,
Yes.
Ms. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Hutt,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Reverend Wilson, Mr. Allen,
Yes.
and Mr. Goldstein.
Yes.
Okay, so we have the University Center up for next month.
And we would like, if possible, and I had discussed this with Mr. Dwyer, if we could perhaps have a special meeting to have the resolution approved.
The resolution we just wrote, we just did?
Yes, yes, when it's drafted up.
I understand, Mr. Kolke, there was a time limit with regard to funding for these projects?
Well, yeah, that's basically what's involved, is trying to move it to get the application submitted, and you need the resolution to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that depends upon how quickly it's written.
You mean
I
you
suggested-
you can't wait until the next regular meeting?
It would be very advantageous for this situation to get that application in, and the resolution is the
Okay.
last part of it.
All right. Well, we live in town.
You can have a half hour.
No, I know
It would
that's
take
fine.
15 minutes.
Well, that's what I mean.
We
Okay,
checked,
so
and
how-
April 23rd was, at 6:45, April 23rd was available for the space. And I would have
6:45
it
on
by
April 23rd?
Reason
I am
being,
not available.
I can't do the 23rd either.
There's another board here.
23rd is, must be a Tuesday? What is the 23rd?
No, 23rd is Tuesday.
Tuesday.
But we need 5. And we're down to 4.
Eddie, you had some other times?
Any other times? What's going on in this village? A lot of stuff.
Well, there's a lot of other stuff other
I
than just
guess
the
so.
village.
It's endless. It's
Yeah,
just one
it
long
goes on
endless
and on.
meeting. It's just
For people
believe
like
me,
you who are
believe
concerned,
me.
the concern.
You just come every night?
Can I ask a question, procedural question? Is it legal to adjourn this meeting and call the next meeting?
Not without notice.
Or you have to provide notice?
For a special meeting?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just checking.
Good
Well, we
thought,
didn't
though.
succeed on one of the dates that we were floating around, and
Jettie, you had looked at a couple of dates.
Thursday, the 25th.
Thursday the 25th.
I'm out of town.
Ellen?
I don't know. I can't tell you now because I only looked for the 23rd.
And I thought the 15th you thought was available?
I'm good on the 25th.
I'm out of the
Wouldn't be
country.
able
I'm
to
not here.
notice in time. Can't notice in time for the 15th. That's next.
25th, yeah, I can. 2 weeks?
You in? Are you in?
2 days.
On the 25th?
We can notice.
Doesn't he doesn't have to notify everybody again? For a special meeting for them?
25th and the 26th.
It's a special meeting for
Oh,
them.
you got 2 days notice. No, everybody's here. Just gotta give special.
Okay, so let's just...
Meeting notice.
Okay, the 25th. 1, 2, 3, 4.
6:45?
6:45. We need to know,
I don't know
Ellen,
if you
whether
can
you
vote
can
yes.
attend.
25th?
I'll know tomorrow. I'll know.
On the resolution.
We'll know
you voted
tomorrow.
no, right?
I won't be here.
Oh, okay.
I'm,
You and I
it's a
are-
moot point.
25th.
Right.
That's my partner's birthday.
25th on the
I'm
I'm very careful about moot.
Can you wait 1 second? She'll run downstairs.
Are we also rolling the definitions to the next meeting? Again?
Mr. Chairman, one other scheduling matter. We carried the University Center from whenever it was on to the last meeting and then to tonight. I'd like to call that matter again, so we keep the continuity of notice going. The other thing is that, you know, that schedule for May 6th, I know you must have other applications rather than, we don't want to take up your entire agenda or calendar, so if it would be preferable to move it to a meeting in June, we'd certainly be amenable to that if it helps
Would you
your
prefer it?
calendar.
Jettie, do we have anything else scheduled calendar for the 6th yet?
Not at this moment.
Okay.
I mean, if you would prefer to postpone it.
Well, that was one concern. The other was making sure we got the stormwater done.
Let us know, and then we will alert the board.
I'm sorry. It's been a long day.
It's been a lot easier because of all the disciplines.
All right,
Oh, yeah.
we'll proceed on May
Let us know.
6th, I guess.
You're good. We will be able to attend a special meeting on the 25th. So we'll notice that.
At what time?
6:45.
Okay.
Who said 6:45?
Right, that would be,
Is that good?
Why
That's
not
the only
7?
thing in the agenda.
Because there's a meeting that's planned for.
You're just going to come in and vote?
Yeah, but the same way.
and there would need to be advertisement of that as a special meeting.
All right, so 6:45 on April 25th.
All right, thank you
We'll
very
come.
much. Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you very much, everybody, and we're adjourned. Thank you, guys.